The world does not respect the person who gives themselves away. You've been taught your entire life that warmth is a virtue, that if you stay open, kind, endlessly accessible, the world will eventually return that love to you. But look at your own experience. The more available you became, the more taken for granted you felt. The more you explained yourself, the less you were understood. And somewhere deep down, you started to wonder if being nice was quietly costing you your power. When your peace depends on other people's approval, you are not free. Stoicism teaches something far more radical than kindness. It teaches sovereignty. Your value cannot rise and fall with someone's text message, tone of voice, or validation. Real strength isn't loud, it's controlled. It's the calm that doesn't beg. It's the presence that doesn't chase. And once you understand that, the way you move through the world changes completely. Here's the truth most people are too uncomfortable to say out loud. Value changes when access changes. That's not a moral statement. It's a law. The more available something is, the less people notice it. Not because people are evil, but because the brain adapts. Your attention adapts. Your emotions adapt. Your respect adapts. When you're always reachable, always agreeable, always present, you slowly become part of the background. Like music in a store. No one hates it. They just stop hearing it. And the painful part is that many of us were trained to believe constant warmth is the way to earn love. Be nice, be understanding, be the bigger person, be easy to reach. But warmth without boundaries doesn't turn into love. It turns into expectation. And expectation is the quiet beginning of disrespect. You feel it when your kindness becomes something people assume they're owed. You feel it when your effort only gets noticed once it disappears. That's where coldness begins, not in cruelty, but in awareness. In the moment you realize you have been overgiving and undervaluing yourself. Seneca warned about imbalance when he wrote, "No one can live happily who has regard to himself alone." That doesn't mean abandon yourself for others. It means live with integrity, not desperation. It means give from strength, not from fear of losing approval. Being cold, in the Stoic sense, starts when you stop measuring your worth by how warmly the world responds to you. And once you see that, something shifts inside. You begin to notice how much of your behavior has been shaped by the need to be liked. The quick replies, the long explanations, the softening of your own opinions just to keep the peace. You tell yourself it is kindness, but sometimes it is anxiety in disguise. It is the fear of being misunderstood, rejected, or left behind. The Stoics would call this attachment to external validation. This does not mean you become distant or lifeless. It means you detach from outcomes. You do your work with focus, but you release the need for applause. You care about people, but you do not collapse when they pull away. You give, but you do not beg. That detachment is powerful because it removes fear. Fear of losing the deal, fear of losing the relationship, fear of losing the image you built. When fear drives you, others can sense the urgency. When you are detached, your presence slows down. You walk into rooms without scanning for approval. You hold eye contact without demanding reassurance. You say no without building a long defense around it. And that calm refusal, that simple boundary, carries more authority than any argument ever could. At some point, you realize that much of your overgiving was rooted in the shadow parts of you that you never examined. The part that fears being unwanted. The part that believes love must be earned through constant effort. Carl Jung warned, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many people call it fate when they repeatedly end up drained, unappreciated, or overlooked. But often it is just an unconscious pattern of over-availability. When you bring that pattern into awareness, you stop blaming the world and start adjusting your own behavior. That is real power. Not control over others, but clarity over yourself. Coldness in this sense becomes integration. You accept your need for connection, but you refuse to let it turn into self-erasure. And as you integrate that awareness, your communication changes naturally. You stop explaining yourself to exhaustion. You stop arguing to prove your worth. You say what needs to be said, then you let it land. Words become fewer but stronger. Presence becomes quieter but heavier. People may call it distant at first. They may call it different. But what they are really sensing is stability. You are no longer pulled by every emotional current. You are anchored. That anchor is what Stoicism has always pointed toward: inner governance. A life directed by principles rather than impulses. Over time, something remarkable happens. Your warmth becomes intentional. You are not warm because you are afraid to lose people. You are warm because you choose to be, and that choice makes it valuable. When you smile, it feels real. When you offer help, it feels earned. When you give your time, it feels like a gift rather than a default. The psychology of being cold is not about shrinking your heart. It is about protecting it. It is about understanding that respect grows in the space where self-control lives. You become less reactive, less desperate, less dependent on applause. And in that space, you discover something surprising. You are not colder. You are clearer. You are not detached from life. You are detached from the fear that once controlled it. And that clarity, quiet and steady, is what makes people feel your presence long after you leave the room. If this clarity resonates with you, consider subscribing. Not as a routine click, but as a commitment to living by principle instead of impulse. Stay connected to the version of yourself that chooses discipline over drama and strength over reaction. You can actually see this dynamic in the way people talk. When someone feels uncertain inside, they overexplain outside. They send long paragraphs. They justify simple decisions. They soften every sentence so it lands gently. They add extra words, extra emojis, extra apologies, extra just checking in, extra I don't know if you saw my message. It doesn't come from weakness. It comes from fear. The fear of being misunderstood, the fear of being disliked, the fear of losing connection. So they try to manage perception through language. They try to close every possible gap so the other person has no room to judge them. But the more they try to control how they are seen, the more they reveal that they are not at peace with themselves. The need to be understood quietly turns into the need to be approved. And once approval becomes your goal, freedom starts slipping away. Because you are no longer speaking to express yourself. You are speaking to prevent rejection. This is where Stoicism draws a line that feels uncomfortable at first, but powerful once you understand it. Epictetus said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." That sounds harsh, but it is not an insult. It is a doorway. It means you stop fighting to control how others interpret you. You stop exhausting yourself trying to appear reasonable to everyone. You accept that some people will misunderstand you no matter how clearly you explain. And instead of chasing clarity in their minds, you secure clarity in your own. That is emotional self-sufficiency. It is the ability to speak plainly, act firmly, and allow others to respond however they choose. You do not chase their approval. You do not rush to correct their assumptions. You let your actions stand, and when you do that, something shifts. Your words become fewer, your sentences become cleaner, your presence becomes heavier. People sense that you are not performing for them anymore. And that calm has weight. Think about the difference between someone who talks constantly to fill space and someone who speaks only when necessary. The first might seem friendly, but their words scatter. The second might seem quiet, but their words land. Silence is not emptiness, it is control. It is space that you choose not to fill. When you become comfortable with silence, other people feel it. They lean forward, they listen more carefully, not because you are trying to dominate, but because you are no longer trying to impress. There is a dignity in restraint. There is strength in letting your ideas breathe without wrapping them in layers of explanation. This is where coldness, understood correctly, becomes clarity rather than distance. It is not about shutting down emotion. It is about refusing to let emotion spill into every sentence. It is about recognizing that your worth does not rise or fall based on how quickly someone agrees with you. When you stop pleading for your position to be accepted, you start standing in it. That stance changes how you move. You respond instead of react. You say no without writing an essay. You express disagreement without apologizing for having a mind of your own. And people notice, not because you are louder, but because you are steadier. This does not mean you become cold in a harsh or cruel way. It means you become selective with your energy. You understand that every word carries weight, so you do not waste it. You stop seeing communication as a way to secure safety and start seeing it as a way to express truth. That shift is subtle, but it changes everything. Because once you are no longer performing for approval, you begin to embody presence. And presence cannot be faked. It is felt. It is the quiet confidence of someone who does not need to be constantly understood in order to remain steady. Over time, this way of speaking reshapes your identity. You stop being the person who anxiously manages perception. You become the person who manages themselves. That self-management is the core of Stoic discipline. It is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is practiced in small moments, in the message you do not send, in the explanation you do not add, in the pause you allow to stretch without fear. Those moments accumulate. They build a new standard inside you, and as that standard grows, so does the respect you receive. Not because you demanded it, but because you stopped chasing it. In the end, being cold in this sense is simply being anchored. Your speech reflects your stability. Your silence reflects your confidence. Your restraint reflects your self-trust. You are no longer trying to shape every mind around you. You are shaping your own. And when your mind becomes ordered, your words naturally follow. They become fewer, clearer, and stronger. That is not distance. That is sovereignty. And once you taste that sovereignty, you will never want to go back to exhausting yourself for approval again. Here's where the psychology gets sharp, and maybe a little uncomfortable. Most human beings are shaped by reward and reaction. From childhood, we learn what gets approval and what gets rejection. Smile, and you get praised. Cry, and someone rushes in. Speak up, and someone responds. Stay quiet, and someone notices. Over time, your nervous system begins to map these patterns. It starts to connect emotion with outcome. So if someone can pull a reaction out of you, anger, guilt, fear, excitement, they learn something powerful. They learn they can move you. Not always on purpose, not always with bad intentions. But the pattern forms. The body remembers. If a certain tone makes you panic, that tone becomes a tool. If criticism makes you scramble to prove yourself, criticism becomes a leash. And once someone discovers where your buttons are, they don't have to push hard. They only have to push accurately. When you stop reacting automatically, you become unpredictable in the best way. You are no longer easy to steer. People cannot guess which emotional lever will move you because you are not handing them the control panel, and you can feel how different that is. Someone throws disrespect at you, expecting you to defend yourself, and you do not rise to the bait. You look at them, you listen, you respond only if necessary. Someone tries to pull you into drama, and you do not engage. Someone tests your boundary, and instead of arguing, you calmly enforce it. That is not distance, that is discipline. The cold person is not numb. They are trained. They do not give their emotional remote control to whoever shows up loudest in the room. There is something deeply psychological about this. The human brain is wired to seek patterns. If it expects anger and receives calm, it hesitates. If it expects pleading and receives quiet confidence, it recalibrates. The pattern is broken, and once the pattern breaks, the dynamic changes. Epictetus said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." That idea is not about suppressing emotion, it is about choosing your response instead of being driven by it. When you react impulsively, you reveal your triggers. When you respond deliberately, you conceal them. You protect your inner world. And protecting your inner world is not secrecy, it is sovereignty. Think about how often people use reaction as a measure of influence. If they can make you angry, they feel powerful. If they can make you jealous, they feel desired. If they can make you anxious, they feel important. Reaction becomes validation. But when you refuse to react in predictable ways, you quietly remove that validation. You do not feed the ego that is trying to provoke you. You do not reward the behavior that is trying to control you. You remain centered. And that center is what creates respect, not fear, not intimidation, respect, because stability is rare. Most people are pulled in 100 directions by every word, every tone, every delay in communication. The person who is not pulled stands out. Carl Jung once wrote, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves." Reaction often reveals more about your own unresolved wounds than about the other person's behavior. When someone's tone makes you feel small, there may be an old insecurity being touched. When someone's criticism makes you defensive, there may be an unhealed doubt inside you. Coldness, in the Stoic sense, gives you time to examine that instead of projecting it outward. Instead of lashing out, you observe. Instead of defending, you reflect. You ask yourself what part of you was activated. That reflection strengthens you far more than any argument ever could. And that is the quiet power of being cold. It is not about withdrawal. It is about mastery. It is about knowing that your inner world is yours to govern. You feel, but you choose. You hear, but you decide. You are not a reflex, you are a responder. That subtle shift changes every interaction, because once people realize they cannot control you through reaction, they either rise to your level of composure or they move on. And either way, you remain steady, grounded, in control of your mind. That control, calm and deliberate, is where real strength begins. A lot of people believe the secret to strength is the perfect comeback, the sharp line, the clever reply that silences the room. But that is not where real power lives. The real power is in the pause. The pause changes everything. It is small, almost invisible, yet it rewires the moment. When you pause, even for 2 seconds, you interrupt the old script running inside you. The script that says, "Please like me, please don't leave, please don't misunderstand me, please don't be upset." Most of us do not even realize how often we are negotiating for acceptance. The pause is where that negotiation stops. It is the quiet space where you remember that you are not a reflex, you are a chooser. That tiny gap between stimulus and response is where discipline is built. It feels uncomfortable at first, because you are used to reacting quickly. Quick defense, quick apology, quick explanation. But when you pause, your body learns something new. It learns that discomfort is survivable. It learns that you do not have to rush to fix how others feel about you. And in that pause, your energy shifts. Instead of leaning forward to secure approval, you lean back into yourself. You breathe, you observe, you decide. Epictetus once said, "No man is free who is not master of himself." Mastery begins in that space between feeling and action. It begins when you choose not to hand your reaction to whoever provokes you. Something interesting happens when you grow comfortable with silence. The other person begins to fill it. They explain more, they talk longer, they reveal more than they intended. Not because you are manipulating them, but because silence creates uncertainty, and most people cannot tolerate uncertainty. We are wired to close gaps quickly. When you do not rush to close the gap, the dynamic changes. The attention shifts. Calm becomes a mirror. It reflects the other person's energy back to them. If they are anxious, their anxiety becomes louder against your stillness. If they are aggressive, their aggression looks exaggerated next to your composure. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." The pause is how you live that truth. It is how you protect your inner world from being invaded by every external impulse. Calm can feel intimidating to others because it signals inner stability. It suggests that you do not need the moment to go your way in order to remain steady. In a world where people perform their emotions loudly, where reactions are instant and constant, restraint stands out. Not as coldness in the cruel sense, but as grounded presence. Think about the difference between someone who reacts immediately and someone who listens, considers, and then responds. The second person feels stronger, not because they speak more forcefully, but because they are not rushing. They are not scrambling to secure validation. They are comfortable letting the moment breathe. This kind of calm is not numbness. It is trained awareness. It does not mean you feel nothing. You still feel irritation, excitement, disappointment. The difference is that you allow those feelings to pass through you before you act on them. Seneca observed, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." Much of our quick reaction is fueled by imagined threat. We assume rejection before it is confirmed. We assume attack before it is clear. The pause interrupts that imagination. It gives you time to ask whether what you are reacting to is real or just a story in your head. Often, the story dissolves once you slow down. Over time, the pause becomes natural. It is no longer forced. It becomes your default setting. You stop trying to win every exchange. You stop trying to correct every misunderstanding. You let some comments pass without reply. You let some tension exist without rushing to smooth it over. That restraint builds quiet authority. People sense that you are not easily shaken. They sense that you are not desperate for harmony at any cost. And that perception changes how they treat you. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." The pause is part of that acceptance. When you stop reacting to secure approval, you accept that not everyone will agree with you. You accept that some will misread you. You accept that you do not have to correct every assumption. That acceptance is freeing. It removes the constant pressure to perform. You no longer need to be seen as the reasonable one, the kind one, the always understanding one. You simply need to be centered. As your reactions slow down, your confidence deepens. Not loud confidence, not performative confidence, the kind that does not need witnesses. You begin to notice that fewer words are required, that a steady gaze says more than a clever sentence, that a calm tone carries more weight than a raised voice. Aristotle once said, "He who has overcome his fears will truly be free." The fear of silence, the fear of disapproval, the fear of awkwardness, these are subtle fears that drive quick reactions. When you overcome them, you feel lighter, more grounded, and that grounding changes how you move through the world. You do not chase the perfect comeback because you do not need to win the exchange. You do not rush to fix tension because you are not afraid of it. You let moments unfold without forcing them. The pause becomes your ally. It protects your dignity. It protects your clarity. It protects your peace. In the end, the pause is not about strategy. It is about sovereignty. It is the quiet reminder that you govern yourself. You feel, but you choose. You listen, but you decide. You allow emotion, but you do not obey it blindly. That is what makes calm powerful. It is not loud, it does not demand attention, yet it commands respect. And in that steady silence you begin to understand that true strength has never been about saying more. It has always been about knowing when not to speak at all. Now let's take this deeper, because being cold is not a surface behavior. If it is only a technique, it becomes stiff, obvious, and fake. People can sense when you are performing detachment while secretly hoping for approval. Real coldness is not a trick, it is detachment. Not detachment from people in a harsh way, but detachment from outcomes. That shift changes everything. The desperate mind says, "I need this." I need them to reply. I need them to choose me. I need this deal to close. I need this job. I need this validation. And the moment you move from preference to need, something inside you tightens. Your posture changes, your tone changes, your patience disappears. You start leaking. You leak energy. You leak dignity. You leak clarity. You start negotiating against yourself before anyone else does. The Stoics were direct about this. They taught that you give full effort to your role, and then you release the result, not because you do not care, but because clinging weakens you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." That sentence holds a quiet strength. You show up, you prepare, you act with discipline, and once you have done what is in your control, you let the rest unfold. When you cling to the outcome, you shrink. You tolerate behavior you know is wrong. You lower your standards because you are afraid to lose the opportunity. You say yes while your inner voice is shouting no. You stay longer than you should because walking away feels too risky, and people can sense that risk in you. They can feel that you are afraid to lose them. When you are afraid to lose, you give up leverage without realizing it. Neediness is not always loud. Sometimes it hides behind kindness, flexibility, and understanding. But it has a scent. It signals that you will accept less than you deserve because you are scared of ending up empty-handed. Detachment sends a different message. It says, "I would like this, but I do not depend on it. I value this, but I will not trade myself for it." That message carries weight, not because you are trying to intimidate anyone, but because you are complete enough to walk away. Seneca observed, "He who is brave is free." Courage here is not about confrontation. It is about being brave enough to lose what is not aligned with you. It is about trusting that your worth does not collapse when something leaves your life. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop begging. You stop tying your identity to external outcomes. When someone does not reply, you do not spiral. When someone chooses differently, you do not collapse. When a deal falls through, you do not see it as proof of your inadequacy. You feel disappointment, but you do not let it define you. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power and take the rest as it happens." What is in your power is effort, character, response. What is not in your power is someone else's decision. Once you understand that deeply, you stop chasing control where it does not exist. There is a strange freedom in this. When you are detached from outcomes, you become more effective. You speak more clearly because you are not afraid of losing the conversation. You negotiate more firmly because you are not terrified of the deal collapsing. You love more honestly because you are not clinging to the other person as your only source of worth. Detachment sharpens you. It removes the fog of desperation. You can see situations for what they are instead of what you hope they will become. And that clarity changes your choices. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." Many people never reach that privilege because they are too busy trying to secure outcomes that validate them. They shape themselves around what will be accepted. They bend around what will be approved. They attach their identity to external confirmation. Detachment is the moment you begin to stand in who you are without waiting for applause. You do not twist yourself to fit. You do not shrink to be chosen. You do not inflate to be admired. You remain steady. And that steadiness makes you more attractive, not less. It is important to see that this is not coldness in the sense of emotional emptiness. It is coldness in the sense of inner solidity. You are not asking the world to complete you anymore. You are not searching for someone else to fill the gaps inside you. You still desire, you still prefer, you still care, but your peace is not on the line. You are willing to lose what does not align with you, and that willingness changes your energy completely. When you walk into a room detached from needing anything from it, you stand differently, you listen differently, you move differently, You are not scanning for approval. You are not chasing validation. You are simply present. People feel that presence because it is rare. Most are calculating, hoping, trying to secure something. You are grounded. And grounded people create gravity. This gravity is not loud. It does not demand attention. It attracts it naturally, because others sense that you are not trying to extract something from them. You are whole, and wholeness is powerful. It signals that you choose rather than cling, that you participate rather than depend, that you can give without losing yourself and receive without being owned. In the end, detachment is not about becoming less human. It is about becoming more self-governed. You act with full effort, but you release the outcome. You care deeply, but you do not cling desperately. You are willing to walk away if necessary, and that willingness is what makes your presence strong. Not because you are pretending not to care, but because you have learned to care without surrendering your dignity. That is the deeper psychology behind being cold. It is not distance, it is independence. And independence, quiet and steady, is what turns respect from something you chase into something that naturally follows you. The so-called cold mindset is not about shutting the world out. It is the art of selective access. It is the decision to stop rewarding behavior that harms you. It is the discipline to stop explaining your limits like you are asking permission to have them. That shift is subtle but powerful. Instead of over-justifying your no, you let it stand. Instead of softening every refusal with layers of apology, you say what is true and allow the discomfort to exist. That doesn't work for me. I'm not available for that. No. Clean language, simple language. And then you let it land. No performance, no dramatic tone, just clarity. And clarity has weight. When you first begin to do this, it can feel unnatural. You may feel tension in your chest. You may feel the urge to add extra explanation, to smooth the moment, to make sure the other person still likes you. That urge is old conditioning. It is the part of you that learned love by being agreeable. It is the part that learned safety by avoiding conflict. But safety built on self-erasure is not real safety. It is dependence. Boundaries interrupt that pattern. They force you to tolerate a little discomfort in exchange for long-term respect. Carl Jung explained this deeper layer when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Many people call it fate when they keep ending up around the same draining personalities, the same disrespect, the same emotional chaos. They say, "I just attract these kinds of people." But often it is not attraction. It is access. It is the unconscious habit of allowing certain behaviors to enter without resistance. When you bring that habit into awareness, you begin to see the pattern clearly. You notice how often you let things slide, how often you tolerate what you do not actually agree with. Once you see it, you can change it. And that change begins with small, firm decisions. Boundaries are not loud. They are consistent. You do not need to announce them dramatically. You enforce them quietly. If someone repeatedly calls late at night and it drains you, you stop answering at that hour. If someone speaks to you with disrespect, you shorten the conversation or end it. If someone pressures you with urgency, you take your time anyway. These actions speak louder than arguments. They teach others how to treat you without you having to lecture them. Over time, the people who respect you will adjust. The ones who cannot will drift away. And that drift is not loss, it is alignment. The Stoics understood that self-governance is the root of freedom. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Boundaries follow that principle. If something feels wrong to you, you do not participate. If a situation requires you to lie about your comfort level, you step back. This is not stubbornness, it is integrity. And integrity has a temperature to it. It feels cool, steady, unmoved by pressure. That steadiness is what people interpret as coldness, but it is simply inner alignment. There is also a practical psychology behind selective access. When you stop automatically giving your time and energy, you increase their value, not as a manipulation tactic, but as a natural effect. Scarcity creates attention. When you are no longer constantly available, your presence becomes intentional. People notice when you choose to show up because it is no longer assumed, and you notice something else. You feel lighter, less resentful, less drained, because you are no longer giving out of obligation. You are giving out of choice. It is important to understand that boundaries do not make you distant from those who matter. They make your relationships healthier. When you stop saying yes to everything, your yes becomes meaningful. When you stop allowing disrespect, respect has space to grow. Seneca wrote, "He who respects himself is safe from others." Self-respect begins with the ability to say no without apology. It begins with the recognition that your energy is finite, that your peace is valuable, that your time is not a public resource. As you practice this, you may lose some connections. Some people were only comfortable with the version of you that had no limits. But that loss reveals something important. It shows you who valued you and who valued your availability. The cold mindset does not isolate you. It filters your environment. It keeps what is aligned and releases what is not. Over time, you will notice fewer chaotic interactions, fewer guilt-driven decisions, fewer conversations that leave you exhausted. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with locks. You decide who enters, you decide when it opens, and you decide when it closes. That decision is quiet but transformative. It shifts you from being managed by others to managing yourself. And when you manage yourself with clarity and firmness, you naturally project a calm authority. Not harsh, not hostile, just clear. This clarity connects back to the deeper idea of being cold in the right way. It is not about pushing people away. It is about refusing to let everything in. It is about understanding that openness without discernment leads to chaos. When you combine awareness with restraint, you protect your inner space. And that protected space becomes the foundation of your strength. Because once you stop giving automatic access, you stop living on autopilot. You begin to choose your interactions. You begin to shape your environment. And in that shaping, you reclaim control of your life. Here is the part most people misunderstand, and it is important to slow down here. Coldness without warmth becomes emptiness, and emptiness, if left unattended, turns into bitterness. The goal is not to become frozen. The goal is not to build walls so thick that nothing can touch you. The goal is to become someone whose warmth is earned, not extracted. Someone whose kindness is chosen, not demanded. There is a difference. One comes from strength, the other comes from fear. When people first hear about emotional detachment or controlled presence, they imagine becoming distant, unfeeling, unreachable. But that is not mastery, that is avoidance. True coldness is controlled temperature, not permanent ice. Stoicism never taught people to stop caring. It taught them to care wisely, to love without begging, to give without collapsing, to help without turning themselves into a resource that anyone can drain. That distinction matters. You can be generous and still have limits. You can be warm and still be firm. You can be compassionate and still refuse to tolerate disrespect. When your warmth becomes selective, it becomes meaningful. It is no longer automatic. It is no longer something people assume they are entitled to. It becomes something they recognize as valuable because it is not handed out carelessly. Think about how different that feels. When you give your attention to someone who has shown consistency, loyalty, and respect, that attention carries weight. It feels intentional. It feels real. When you offer support to someone who has stood by you, that support feels strong rather than desperate. The energy changes. People sense that your kindness is a choice, not a reflex, and that choice creates depth. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one." Being good does not mean being endlessly available. It means acting with principle. It means giving from integrity, not insecurity. That integrity is what protects you from sliding into emptiness. Coldness done incorrectly is simply emotional shutdown. It is withdrawal rooted in fear. But coldness done correctly is clarity. It is the decision not to melt for noise, not to collapse under pressure, not to chase someone who treats you like an option. When you stop chasing, something powerful happens. You notice who steps forward without being pulled. You notice who respects your space without being reminded. You notice who values you without constant reassurance. That awareness protects your energy, and it filters your environment in ways that arguments never could. There is also a deeper psychological layer here. When your warmth is automatic, people stop noticing it. It becomes background. But when it is intentional, it becomes impactful. Scarcity sharpens perception, not as a tactic, but as a natural effect. When you are not warm to everyone, the warmth you offer becomes felt. It lands, it stays, and strangely, you begin to respect yourself more, because you are no longer handing out the best parts of you to anyone who asks. You are discerning, you are thoughtful, you are aligned. Epictetus taught that freedom begins when you control what is within your power and release what is not. Your warmth is within your power. Where you direct it is within your power. You do not owe it to everyone. You do not owe access to everyone. When you choose carefully, you prevent resentment from building. You prevent bitterness from forming. Because bitterness usually grows when you give too much to those who give too little back. Selective warmth keeps that imbalance from taking root. There is something magnetic about steadiness, not dramatic intensity, not emotional volatility, steadiness. In a world full of constant reaction, the person who remains centered stands out. They do not swing wildly between extremes. They do not flood every interaction with emotion. They remain grounded. That grounded presence feels safe. It feels strong. It feels rare. And rarity always attracts attention. But remember, the purpose is not to attract attention. The purpose is to protect alignment. When you remain steady, you make decisions from clarity rather than impulse. You respond rather than react. You give because you choose to give, not because you fear losing someone. And that difference reshapes your relationships. You are no longer negotiating for approval. You are participating from strength. Over time, you realize that being intentionally cold in certain moments allows you to be deeply warm in others. Because your warmth is no longer diluted, it is not spread thin across people who do not value it. It is concentrated, focused, meaningful. That focus restores balance. It prevents emptiness. It prevents the slow burn of resentment that comes from giving without return. The person who masters this balance is not less human. They are more disciplined, more aware, more aligned. They can be calm in conflict and present in connection. They can withdraw when necessary and engage when appropriate. They are not ruled by noise. They are not shaken by pressure. They are not chasing those who hesitate. They remain steady. And steadiness, in a restless world, feels powerful because it is scarce. Coldness and warmth are not opposites. They are tools. When used wisely, they create balance. When balanced, they create strength, and strength expressed with intention becomes something others cannot ignore. Not because it is loud, but because it is grounded. Not because it is harsh, but because it is controlled. And that control is what allows you to stay human without becoming consumed. Strength is not about shutting your heart down. It's about holding it steady. It's about choosing when to open, when to step back, and when to stand firm without apology. When you master that balance, you stop being pulled in every direction. You become centered, and a centered person cannot be easily shaken. If something in this message spoke to you, there's another video on your screen that goes even deeper into building that kind of unshakable inner strength. Watch it next, Stay on this path, and thank you for being a part of Stoic Journal.